August 1944, Tinian Island, Pacific Ocean. A Japanese military officer named Colonel Hideo Yamagata stands in the sweltering heat of the tropical island, watching with stunned disbelief as American construction equipment tears through coral and volcanic earth with mechanical ferocity. Before him stretches what had been only days ago raw island terrain, without infrastructure or military capability. Now, emerging from the landscape like impossible artifacts of industrial magic, are massive runways constructed from concrete and steel matting. Not just any runways, but massive concrete strips capable of supporting the heaviest American bombers and enabling continuous flight operations. The transformation has occurred in a time frame that defies Japanese military understanding and expectations completely, where his engineers calculated that months of continuous labor with full equipment would be required to create adequate runways. American Seabees have accomplished the work in merely days of intensive construction operations. Yamagata stares at the yellow and black bulldozers moving across the landscape with mesmerizing efficiency, their massive steel blades scraping earth and coral as easily as a sculptor's hand-shaped clay in artistic creation. He watches as organized teams of workers follow behind the heavy dozers systematically, pouring concrete in precise measurements, laying steel matting methodically, creating infrastructure that seems to materialize from nothing, as if conjured by some American technological sorcery that Japanese military officers had not anticipated and could not comprehend. The story of Japanese military officers encountering American Seabee construction capabilities represents one of the most psychologically devastating realizations that Japanese military leadership would experience during the entire Pacific War. The Seabees, officially the Naval Construction Battalions, that had become legendary across the entire Pacific for their ability to build military infrastructure faster than any military force had previously accomplished in military history, represented a revolutionary approach to military engineering and construction entirely. These were not conventional military engineers attached to combat units and reporting through normal military channels. These were construction workers trained in civilian trades and industries in military uniforms, professional builders and equipment operators who had been mobilized into the Navy to build the infrastructure that American strategic military thinking demanded. The Seabees operated heavy equipment including Caterpillar bulldozers, mobile cranes, concrete mixers, dump trucks, graders, and other machinery that allowed them to accomplish construction projects with unprecedented speed and remarkable efficiency. The organization, logistical support, and equipment availability that supported Seabee operations represented investment of American industrial capacity and resources on a scale that Japanese military planners had utterly failed to anticipate or account for in their strategic calculations and military planning. The Japanese military had captured Tinian Island months earlier through military operations and had recognized its strategic value as a potential airfield location for military purposes. Japanese engineers had conducted preliminary assessments of the island's construction potential and calculated that developing the island into a fully operational military airfield would require approximately 6 to 8 months of intensive construction effort with adequate equipment and experienced labor. The Japanese military lacked both the equipment and the labor force to accomplish such construction at any reasonable pace given resource constraints. Equipment shortages plagued Japanese military operations across the entire Pacific theater consistently. Japanese industry could not produce the quantities of heavy equipment that American factories generated continuously and reliably. Japanese engineers were forced to improvise constantly, to adapt existing equipment, to make do with limited resources and insufficient quantities of materials. The Japanese military operated under chronic resource constraints that shaped all their construction operations and military planning throughout the conflict. When American forces captured Tinian in the summer of 1944, one of the immediate American priorities was transforming the island into a massive forward airfield complex to support American bombing operations against Japan's home islands directly. The distances involved in bombing runs against Japan from existing bases in the Pacific were extraordinary and required extended flights. Extended range brought extended operational risk and reduced bomb loads dramatically. Longer flights meant more fuel consumption and reduced payload capacity for bombs. Bases located closer to Japan would enable heavier bombing raids carrying more destruction. with reduced losses to attrition over extended distances. The strategic logic was clear to American military planners, who calculated every advantage carefully. Tinian Island's location made it ideal for supporting massive bombing operations against Japanese targets. The Seabees were tasked with accomplishing this transformation of island into military base rapidly. The urgency was military and strategic. Every day of delay represented opportunity for Japan to organize defensive responses. Every day that Tinian remained incomplete represented military opportunity lost. The Seabees understood the urgency driving their operations and worked with corresponding intensity and focus. Colonel Yamagata had been assigned to observe American operations on Tinian after American forces secured the island through military action, part of Japanese military intelligence gathering efforts to understand American military capabilities and limitations systematically. He moved carefully through the American military installation, observing operations methodically, taking detailed notes meticulously, documenting what he witnessed with professional military precision. He had expected to find American military efficiency and tactical competence based on previous observations. He had not expected the sheer scale and speed of construction activity occurring before his eyes. The Seabees had mobilized thousands upon thousands of workers and millions of dollars of heavy equipment and materials. They worked with coordination and efficiency that suggested not merely military discipline enforced through command structure, but underlying American abundance of resources that permitted such operations. Every worker seemed to have appropriate equipment for his assigned task without exception. Every piece of heavy equipment moved with apparent purposefulness and skilled operation. The entire operation radiated organization and resource availability that seemed almost surreal to a Japanese officer, accustomed to operations constrained by chronic scarcity and constant improvisation. The Caterpillar D7 bulldozers operated by the Seabees captured Yamagata's particular attention and focused his detailed analysis. These massive machines, representing engineering and manufacturing achievement, went beyond the technical specifications of the equipment itself entirely. They represented tangible testimony to American industrial capacity and American ability to produce heavy equipment in quantities sufficient to equip entire construction battalions completely. Each Caterpillar D7 weighed approximately 35 tons and was powered by gasoline engines producing hundreds of horsepower. The bulldozers moved earth and coral with mechanical efficiency that Yamagata's trained military mind immediately recognized as representing technological advantage and logistical advantage simultaneously. Each bulldozer operator worked with competence and confidence developed through training, the machine responding to the operator's commands with precision and reliability. The machines never seemed to break down or require repair unexpectedly. New machines appeared promptly when machines needed replacement or retirement from service. The supply chain seemed endless and unfailing, a continuous stream of replacement equipment and repair parts flowing into the island. Japanese engineers could not have imagined operating such equipment with such casualness and apparent abundance carelessly. In the Japanese military system, equipment was precious and rare and irreplaceable. Losses of equipment represented catastrophic events that impacted entire military operations adversely. Yet here, American military seemed to regard heavy equipment as essentially disposable, replaceable, renewable resources that could be deployed with abandon, in service of immediate operational objectives and strategic goals. The contrast with Japanese operational methods was stark and telling. Japanese construction efforts proceeded slowly because equipment was conserved carefully. American construction proceeded rapidly because equipment was consumed liberally. The difference represented fundamental divergence in resource availability and operational philosophy. Yamagata recognized that the Seabees could afford operational wastage because American industry could replace damaged or worn equipment continuously. Japanese military could not afford such wastage because Japanese industry could not replace losses. The recognition created awareness in Yamagata's mind that he was observing not merely different operational methods but fundamentally different resource situations enabling fundamentally different operational approaches. The speed of construction progress astonished Yamagata completely and filled him with a sense of professional despair that he struggled to conceal from American observers and other Japanese observers. He calculated with precision, that the Seabees were completing work at 5 to 10 times the pace that Japanese engineers could have accomplished the same work with available equipment and labor and materials. The concrete runways being constructed were laid with precision and quality that matched permanent infrastructure expected to endure. Yet the construction pace resembled temporary or emergency construction requiring urgency. The organization coordinated the activities of thousands upon thousands of workers, hundreds of pieces of heavy equipment, and complex logistical supply chains supplying materials and fuel. The American military appeared to manage all these elements with efficiency that Japanese military operations could barely achieve, even with much simpler projects requiring fewer resources. Yamagata found himself confronting a fundamental recognition that would recur repeatedly as the war progressed, and American construction capabilities became increasingly evident throughout the Pacific. The United States was not merely fighting the Pacific War with superior military equipment and superior training. The United States was fighting the war with superior industrial capacity, superior resource availability, and superior organizational ability to transform industrial capacity into military infrastructure and ultimately military power. The implications of what Yamagata witnessed extended far beyond the immediate airfield construction on Tinian Island. Specifically, the Seabees building airfields on Tinian meant that American long-range B-29 bombers could operate from bases much closer to Japan than had previously been possible geographically. The reduction in distances meant extended range capability for bomber operations and capacity for heavier bomb loads carried per mission. It meant more sustainable operations with reduced aircraft losses to attrition over extended distances and exposure time. It meant that American bombing operations against Japan itself would intensify dramatically with every new base established. The strategic implications were clear to any military officer with strategic education and understanding of military history and operations. The transformation of Tinian into an American military base represented a strategic setback for Japan of considerable magnitude militarily and strategically. The speed with which the transformation had been accomplished meant that Japan had no time to organize any effective response or counter-strategy against American construction. The Japanese military had lost the strategic initiative on Tinian permanently. They had lost the ability to determine how the island would be developed and utilized militarily. They were now reduced to observing American military power reshaping the Pacific strategic environment in ways that served American strategic objectives and advanced American prospects for ultimate victory. The construction battalions that Yamagata observed were themselves composed of thousands upon thousands of workers, organized militarily. The Seabees on Tinian numbered in the tens of thousands, organized into multiple construction battalions coordinated by higher-level construction force commands and superior officers. The organizational structure ensured that complex construction projects could be managed systematically and efficiently. The coordination mechanisms ensured that different aspects of the construction could be executed in proper sequence without delay or confusion. The supply logistics ensured that materials, equipment, and workers were available where and when they were needed without fail. The entire system radiated military organization applied to construction operations systematically. The result was construction executed at military speed and efficiency, which represented transformation of conventional construction approaches into military construction that prioritized speed and operational readiness above most other considerations while maintaining quality standards. The quality of the final product was acceptable for demanding military purposes and exceeded Japanese military construction standards significantly. The speed of construction exceeded all previous military construction experience in any nation's military history. The integration of all these elements created construction capability that Japanese military had not conceived possible or practical. Yamagata observed the Seabees working in organized shifts that ensured continuous construction activity throughout the day and night consistently. Floodlights illuminated the construction sites brilliantly, allowing work to proceed around the clock without interruption. The workers rotated through shifts systematically, maintaining construction momentum even as workers cycled out to rest and recover. The organization ensured that the construction project maintained progress continuously and relentlessly. Japanese military construction had typically operated during daylight hours only, constrained by inadequate lighting and limited night vision technology available to Japanese forces. Night construction was difficult, dangerous, and generally avoided unless emergency situations required it desperately. The Americans simply lit their construction sites with floodlights and continued working throughout the night without hesitation. The casual way that American military mobilized resources and technology to overcome operational obstacles and maintain construction progress impressed and troubled Yamagata simultaneously. He recognized that he was witnessing military organization and resource mobilization that represented transformation of industrial abundance into military capability systematically. The materials flowing into Tinian Island in support of Seabee construction operations were extraordinary in quantity and diversity. Ships arrived continuously bringing cement in quantities that staggered Japanese observers, steel matting for runway construction, reinforcement materials, equipment, fuel, and lubricants, spare parts for equipment, and all the materials required for sustained construction operations continuously. Yamagata recognized that the logistics operation supporting the Seabees required its own extensive infrastructure and organization. Port facilities had to be established and maintained efficiently. Warehouses had to be constructed to store arriving materials safely. Transportation systems had to be organized to move materials from docks to construction sites efficiently. The entire logistical infrastructure supporting the Seabees was itself a massive undertaking requiring significant resources and planning. Yet the American military organized all these elements seamlessly, coordinating complex logistics to ensure that construction operations never lacked required materials or equipment availability. Yamagata calculated that the logistical effort supporting Seabee construction exceeded the total logistical capacity that Japan could mobilize for all military operations across the entire Pacific War theater. The runways that the Seabees constructed on Tinian were not merely adequate for military purposes. They were constructed to exacting specifications that exceeded the minimum requirements for military airfield operations significantly. The concrete was poured to precise thicknesses, ensuring proper load-bearing capacity for the heaviest bombers. The surfaces were finished to proper grades, ensuring proper drainage and adequate aircraft handling characteristics. The matting and construction materials were laid with precision and care, ensuring durability. Quality control was maintained throughout the construction process systematically. The Americans were building infrastructure intended to endure, to withstand repeated use by heavy bombers continuously, to function reliably in the demanding environment of Pacific warfare. The infrastructure was built to last, built to perform under stress, built to military specifications that represented professional engineering standards applied systematically. Japanese construction, by contrast, was frequently constrained by resource limitations and timeline pressures to prioritize speed and minimal functionality over durability and quality assurance. The contrast between American construction, quality, and Japanese construction limitations represented yet another dimension of the broader technological and resource disparity between the nations systematically. The recognition of disparity created awareness in Yamagata's mind that American military possessed not merely tactical advantages, but systemic advantages rooted in industrial capacity and resource availability. These advantages would compound over time as American military utilized superior bases and logistics to extend military power. The implications extended beyond immediate construction to broader strategic implications. Every successful Seabee construction project contributed to American military momentum and confidence. Every completed runway extended American military reach toward Japan. Every base facility enabled American military operations previously impossible. The accumulation of American military infrastructure represented gradual strangulation of Japanese strategic position and military options. The impact of Seabee construction capabilities on military operations became increasingly apparent as the war progressed and American forces advanced across the Pacific. Bases constructed by Seabees enabled American operations that would have been impossible from bases located at greater distances from operational objectives. The extended range enabled by closer base locations and reduced logistical requirements multiplied American military effectiveness exponentially. The speed of construction meant that American military could establish new bases faster than Japanese military could identify strategic responses or organize counter-operations effectively. The Seabees effectively transformed the Pacific strategic environment on timescales that exceeded Japanese military's ability to respond adaptively or defensively. The organization and coordination of Seabee operations demonstrated American military capacity to sustain complex operations across vast distances and challenging environmental conditions systematically. Every successful Seabee construction project contributed to American military momentum and strategic advantage accumulating. The psychological impact of Seabee construction capabilities on Japanese military leadership was profound and demoralizing ultimately. Yamagata and other Japanese officers increasingly recognized that Japan was not merely losing a military conflict measured in tactical engagements and battles. Japan was losing a competition in industrial capacity, in resource availability, in organizational capability, in military logistics, and in strategic vision fundamentally. The Seabees represented tangible evidence of American ability to mobilize industrial resources into military construction at scales and speeds that Japan could not match or overcome through any conventional means. The recognition that Japan faced not merely a more numerous or better equipped enemy, but an enemy possessing fundamentally superior industrial capacity and organizational capability, created despair among Japanese military leadership systematically. Some officers began articulating the realization that military defeat was becoming inevitable if Japan could not somehow reverse the fundamental industrial disparities between the nations. Yet no strategy existed for reversing technological and industrial advantages accumulated over decades. No military tactic could overcome industrial disparity and resource shortage. No diplomatic solution seemed available to Japan, given American determination to defeat Japan completely. The Seabees represented the embodiment of American industrial might, translated directly into military construction capability and military power. Colonel Yamagata continued to document his observations on Tinian meticulously, compiling detailed reports that ascended through Japanese military command structures methodically. His reports conveyed the technical specifications of the airfield construction and the American equipment and methods employed. Yet his reports also conveyed the broader recognition of American industrial capability and resource abundance reflected in construction operations. The Seabees building airfields on Tinian were not merely soldiers performing military construction under orders. They represented American military systems' capacity to mobilize industrial resources on unprecedented scales systematically. The speed, efficiency, and quality of construction testified to American manufacturing capability, American resource availability, and American organizational capability applied to military purposes. Yamagata's reports contributed to growing recognition among senior Japanese military leaders that the war was becoming increasingly difficult to sustain and potentially impossible to win against an adversary possessing such fundamental advantages in industrial capacity and military organization. The Caterpillar D7 bulldozer that Yamagata observed with such intense fascination represented in itself a considerable engineering achievement. The machine weighed approximately 35 tons and required sophisticated engine design, transmission systems, hydraulic systems, control mechanisms, and precision manufacturing. The machine represented investment of engineering expertise and manufacturing capacity by American industry. American factories produced these machines in large quantities, equipping construction battalions with multiple machines per unit throughout the Pacific. Japanese industry could not produce comparable equipment in remotely similar quantities or quality. The disparity between American and Japanese manufacturing capacity for heavy equipment represented fundamental industrial inequality between the nations. Each Caterpillar D7 that Yamagata observed represented American manufacturing achievement and Japanese manufacturing inability simultaneously. The bulldozers working on Tinian represented testimony to American industrial power that Japanese military could observe directly, yet could not hope to match through any conventional industrial mobilization. The impact of Seabee construction extended far beyond Tinian Island, into all the islands and locations where American forces established bases throughout the Pacific. Across the Pacific theater, Seabees transformed captured territory into military infrastructure at unprecedented speed and scale. Airfields appeared in locations that had been considered marginal or inadequate for military use previously. Bases that could have taken years to develop with conventional construction were built in weeks or months. The ability to establish forward bases rapidly enabled American military strategy of advancing across the Pacific, establishing bases at each major location, using those bases to extend American military reach into previously unreachable areas and territories. The Seabees made this strategy possible and practical militarily. Without Seabee construction capability, American military would have faced severe logistical constraints that would have forced much slower strategic pace and operational tempo. The Seabees enabled strategic tempo that resulted in continuous American advance and continuous erosion of Japanese strategic position and military options. Yamagata eventually departed Tinian Island and returned to Japanese military headquarters to brief senior commanders. He carried with him detailed documentation of American Seabee construction operations and comprehensive testimony regarding American construction capabilities and industrial power. He also carried recognition that Japan faced fundamental industrial disadvantages that military strategy and tactical skill could not overcome or compensate for adequately. The Seabees building airfields on Tinian represented American industrial might translated into military capabilities systematically. The speed, efficiency, and scale of construction operations demonstrated American access to resources and manufacturing capacity that Japan could not match or overcome through any reasonable military effort. The recognition that American military possessed such capability and was actively utilizing it to extend American military reach toward Japan itself created urgency and despair among Japanese military leadership. Some Japanese officers began advocating for negotiated settlement of the conflict to minimize Japanese casualties. Others recommended preparation for eventual military defeat and post-war reconstruction. A few continued to advocate for continued resistance, despite the apparent futility of continued fighting. The Seabees continued their construction operations across the Pacific throughout 1944 and into 1945 relentlessly. The airfields they built on Tinian enabled American B-29 bombing campaigns against Japan's home islands and industrial centers. The airfields they built on Iwo Jima and other locations extended American military reach progressively. The infrastructure they built supported American military operations that advanced progressively closer to Japan. Every airfield, every pier, every base facility that Seabees constructed represented investment in American military power and Japanese strategic defeat. The speed of construction meant that American military could establish new bases faster than Japanese military could destroy or neutralize them effectively. The constant expansion of American military infrastructure across the Pacific represented gradual strangulation of Japanese strategic position militarily. The Seabees building bases represented American ability to transform industrial capacity into military infrastructure and military power systematically. The recognition that Japan faced defeat became increasingly apparent to Japanese military and political leadership as 1944 progressed into 1945. The Seabees building airfields represented one critical element of broader American military advantage, accumulated systematically. Yet the visibility of Seabee construction operations meant that Japanese military officers could observe directly how American military was systematically transforming the Pacific strategic environment. The evidence was tangible, observable, and undeniable to any observer. Japanese military could not dismiss or deny the implications of Seabee construction capability without losing credibility. The airfields being built on Tinian and other islands could be observed from distance. The speed of construction could be documented through military intelligence. The quality of infrastructure could be assessed professionally. The implications of American capability could be calculated mathematically. And the calculations invariably led to same conclusion repeatedly. Japan faced military defeat unless it could somehow achieve strategic surprise, or unless American military made catastrophic strategic errors through miscalculation. Neither scenario seemed likely given American military competence demonstrated throughout the war. Both scenarios became increasingly implausible as time progressed, and American military demonstrated consistent competence. The story of Japanese military officers encountering American Seabee construction capability represented a pivotal moment when advanced military technology and industrial organization created strategic advantage that opponents could observe directly yet could not hope to overcome through conventional military means or strategic approaches. The Seabees working on Tinian Island represented American industrial might, directly converted into military infrastructure and military power systematically. The recognition by Japanese military that they faced industrial disadvantages that military strategy could not overcome created psychological and strategic despair throughout the officer corps. The Seabees building airfields represented American confidence in ultimate military victory and willingness to invest massive resources into infrastructure that advanced American military objectives. The construction operations demonstrated American conviction that American military would ultimately defeat Japan and would require infrastructure to sustain operations against Japan's home islands through military campaigns. The Seabees building on Tinian represented American military organization and American industrial capacity organized and mobilized into construction operations that achieved strategic results through construction, rather than through direct combat operations.